Hi, I'm Mrs. Carver, and I'm going to be reading Chapter 15, Beware of the Purgator. Can I drive? John asked, already jumping behind the steering wheel. Except for the science fair judges, Teresa had never let anyone drive her spider before. No one had ever asked. Why hadn't Darby, Tamika, or Kayla ever wanted to? She suddenly felt a wave of sadness, but excitement too. She'd she'd moved to a new state where she missed her old friends, but found herself making new ones. She felt like maybe she had found her people. Sure, she said. See how it has a forward pedal and a reverse? You turn the wheel to go left or right. Well, that's it really. Let's get Ashley before we go. John gave her a look that meant Ashley would ruin all the fun. There's only room on this spider for two, John said. I'll run alongside it, Teresa said. There's no way she was going to be the mean girl and leave Ashley out. No, she refused to be that. Fine, John groaned, as if he had done it 100 times before. He pressed on the forward pedal and turned the wheel. With a clickety-click-click-click-click-click-click, he lunged forward. Whoa, this spider can go. 12 miles an hour at top speed, she said proudly. John wouldn't crash into anything, would he? Was this a horrible idea? Luckily, he was driving in a relatively straight line down the walkway. 5 painted buntings flew out of his way, and a gray heron launched off the upper-level handrail when John yelled, "Woohoo!" Teresa had to admit, she liked that he liked it. Ashley's lab was 3 doors to the right. John pretended he didn't know that. Teresa could tell he fully intended to drive right by it. But as they neared the door, they heard the sound of music. Ashley was playing The Sorcerer's Apprentice from the musical Fantasia. It was one of Teresa's favorite Disney musicals. Teresa couldn't help herself. She jumped out of the passenger seat and ran into Ashley's lab. Ashley was in her own world with The Sorcerer's Apprentice as her soundtrack. She was waving her hands like a conductor and using an eyedropper to give tiny lunches to her rainbow-colored algae. I love this song, Teresa yelled, and Ashley jumped. You scared me! Teresa came closer to look in her aquariums. She had never found algae worth looking at before, but Ashley's glimmered in the water like floating aliens of all colors, rusty reds and fluorescent greens, and the very deepest of blues. In the bottom of one of the aquariums was a plastic Mickey Mouse wearing the sorcerer's cap. I listen to Disney when I'm working too, Teresa said. Ashley smiled and said quietly, this symphony makes me feel like I'm the apprentice, and these algae are my magic brooms. But then, remembering that Teresa was supposed to be her competition, she hid her smile and returned to dropping food into the aquariums. But Teresa would not let her escape so easily. We're going exploring, Ashley. Want to come? Ashley spun on her heel with a stare that Teresa had already grown to expect from her, critical and disapproving. You're supposed to be working on your invention. Don't you want to win? Win what? Win what? Ashley mimicked in disbelief. To win the chance to have your invention be in next year's Flax Innovations for a Better World catalog. Teresa shrugged. I didn't think we were here to win or lose. Ashley shook her head and said, those are the words of a loser. Teresa had been called strange and weird and abnormally shy and even a hermit, but never once has she been called a loser. How many times, she wondered, should you try to be friends with someone who is simply downright dead set on being mean? Even if it's the right thing to do, how many times should you ignore someone determined to be your enemy? You can't force someone to be your friend, right? Okay, fine then, Teresa said curtly. See you later. Teresa turned and hopped back into the passenger seat of the Spider. John gave Teresa a look that said, I told you so, and then pressed the forward pedal all the way down. They passed door after door with some intriguing names above them, some with none at all. Teresa was worried Zachary would step out from behind a tree at any second to reprimand them. although maybe he didn't care what they did and where they went. It was Miss Curie who seemed to worry they might be a threat to productivity or the lab, or most of all, to Dr. Flax himself. But then they heard a voice behind them. Hey, wait, stop! Teresa looked over her shoulder to see Ashley standing outside her lab. Maybe she was worried about them. Maybe she just wanted to scold them again. Maybe she had changed her mind and wanted to come along but didn't know how to ask. John stepped off the forward pedal, looking at Teresa, expecting her to give Ashley one more chance. Well, John asked her. Keep going, Teresa said sharply, turning back around so she couldn't see Ashley. John pressed the forward pedal. Teresa couldn't be sure, but she thought Ashley was still standing there watching them spider walk away. After they passed the front entrance in the large fountain basin where the one-eyed duck was still swimming in a circle, the interior landscape began to change. The western wing, where the laboratories were, was like a botanical garden full of tweeting birds and flowers of all colors. But when they entered the eastern wing, Teresa felt like she was back on Folly Beach. This wing was landscaped more like a South Carolina marsh. There was spartina grass, palmetto trees, and even dark, thick pluff mud between the two walkways. Teresa saw clumps of oysters peeking out of the mud and thought she saw a rat snake slither into the shadows. It was very quiet on this end except for the ever-present rushing of the water in the walls. John took his foot off the pedal and the spider came to a halt. It's so peaceful here, Teresa said quietly. I like it. A mosquito landed on her arm. She would normally have smacked it, but it seemed wrong to hurt even a mosquito in this perfectly designed laboratory. But mosquitoes, really? Couldn't Dr. Flax have built his paradise without those annoying things? The mosquito filled up with blood, flew away, and Teresa watched the bite on her arm rise to a red bump. A grove of southern live oak trees grew between the walkways here. Teresa remembered where had once been a kiosk that sold mechanical dogs. The dogs were cute toys that could walk and bark and lift their front paws. Teresa had convinced her father to buy her one at age 4, soon after her mother had been lost to the flood. She had loved that dog so much that she took it apart to see how it worked. She wanted to make it bigger. With her Uncle Robert's help, she did, and she had built a new robotic dog twice as big that could walk twice as fast. She installed the voice box from the original dog to give it the same bark. That dog had been her first mechanical creation. It was also the first robot that had helped her forget about the black hole that lived inside her. Teresa had named the dog Lucky after a Dalmatian from her favorite book. And even though that memory and Lucky had been very real, these live oaks seemed to be firmly rooted. It was easy to believe that they had always been there, before Flax Industries or even the paper mill mall. They were proof that if only given the chance, nature could return to any place stronger than it had been before. The live oak branches rose all the way to the skylights, 2 stories up. And as they came closer, Teresa thought she saw the shimmer of water beyond them. Let's check it out, she whispered. John drove the spider slowly through the grove and marsh beyond. The spider's pointed legs made it quite easy to move through the mud. Soon they saw an expansive lake stretched out before them. It was emerald green and sunlight danced off the surface. I knew there had to be a lake here, John whispered as loud as he dared. You did not, Teresa said. I did too. What, with the water in the walls? I knew there had to be a source somewhere. The source could be outside. Well, it's not. It's right here. So let's go water skiing. John was about to drive the spider right into the marsh grass and into the lake until Teresa whispered, Wait, what about the purigator? What's a purigator? John asked. Teresa pointed a sign 20 feet away. John squinted and read the words out loud. Beware of the purigator. Huh, sounds fake. Let's go.